Divine Champions Lifestream pre-releases begin on September 26th, and with the Kissimmee Open the following weekend, it's imperative that players get to testing right away. From the new Dazed and Enraged mechanic, to Aphrodite's duplicates, to even new tools for frost aggro and suppression control, there are many new directions the meta can take from this release. I'm THELAW, and I'm going to break it all down for you so you can get to testing. Let's talk Lifestream.
Bartender, I really did it this time!
Dionysus' base cost is 1 earth and can go up to 4 earth once cast, with the ability to disenchant an earth to either daze or enrage an Elestral until your next turn. Before we get knee deep into this, dazed Elestrals can't attack while dazed, and enraged Elestrals must attack if able and are locked into attack position during their battle phase while enraged. Drataya Champion of Dionysus can daze an Elestral until your next turn on receiving an earth, and can special ascend to Latagon if enraged, enraging your Latagon until the next turn if you do. Latagon Champ can pop a back row once per turn if enraged, and, if destroyed by an opponent, searches a copy of Ambrosia. Sprout Tier Champ can Nexus an earth to search for either a copy of a Champion of Dionysus, or a Dionysus' Madness once per turn. September Champ, on receiving earth, enrages an opponent's Elestral permanently, and can bounce an opponent's attacking enraged Elestral back to hand. Centaur Champ can pop all an opponent's enraged Elestrals at the start of the battle phase, and can daze itself until your next turn to special cast a September from anywhere. Cyanectar Champ can search for Poison Nectar, Poison Tipped Arrow, or Poison Tunic when it's cast or becomes dazed. While Spivey Champ deals piercing, does double damage if enraged, and is always enraged if it ascended from Cyanectar. Cyprong Champ searches Dionysus on normal cast, and if dazed can pop a 1 or 2 Spirit Enchanted Elestral with 5 or more attack. Therisis of Dionysus is a 1 earth artifact that gives its enchanted Elestral +2 attack and makes it enraged, also drawing a card when the Elestral attacks while Dionysus is enchanted. Dionysus' Madness is a 1 earth counter rune that dazes or enrages an Elestral until your next turn, and if Dionysus is enchanted, can change that Elestral's battle position and re-enchant an earth from Underworld to Dionysus. Nectar of the Gods Dionysus' Chalice is a 1 earth counter rune that can draw 3 by discarding an earth card while Dionysus is enchanted. Poison Nectar Dionysus' Chalice is a 1 earth counter rune that makes the opponent discard a card of their choice and burn for 2 if Dionysus is enchanted. Dionysus throughout most of the reveal season was shrouded in mystery because we didn't know for certain what Dazed and Enraged did, seeing a bunch of cards get revealed that mentioned the effect but no confirmation on what it did. There was a bunch of speculation around them though, mostly stemming from being attack forcing or prevention, and where it landed seemed to be a best of both worlds scenario. Dazed preventing attacking is enough for what it needs to be, as if it forced something to defense it would also be a little bit too powerful, and there's plenty of application that can be done with stopping an Elestral from attacking, even if for a single turn. Enrage on the other hand seems absolutely insanely good. By enraging something of the opponents with a card like Dionysus' Madness, you can force a defensive wall to out itself on your Elestral, like in the case of an Astrabbit, forcing it to attack in the opponent's battle phase and then forcing it to ram into your 3+ attack Elestral. When using it on your own pieces though, you make your Elestrals immune to tools like Tsunami and Alter, the former of which had become a meta staple since base set, and with the Enrage mechanic making it fairly difficult to justify on top of one of the most other anticipated decks being Water, we may finally see Tsunami fall out of the main deck. Cyprong Champ will absolutely hold a place in every single Dionysus deck, as it serves as both a searcher for your main playmaker, in addition to an out to some of the more threatening new Elestrals in the set, as they all appear to be 2 costs with 5+ attack. Beyond Cyprong though, the most interesting part about the Dionysus cards is that his Elestrals are subdivided into 3 different decks, as while they each use Dazed and Enraged in their own unique ways, they don't really seem to be needing each other to operate. Starting from Sprout here, you can search your whole Elestral lineup or Madness, but if you opt to, you can search for Centaur Champ and ascend up to it, since Sprout here will be at 2 earth after the Nexus, from which you can daze the Centaur to cast a Timber from anywhere, then enrage an opponent's Elestral and then pop it with Centaur. This also makes your Madness Enrage a pop, in addition to cards like Bloom becoming a double pop since a Timber triggers on every receive. I'd imagine something like a 3-1-1 line would make sense for this strategy, but you could even go to a 3-2-1 line if you wanted to flood the board more, though that sounds a bit bricky for my tastes. Cyanectar Champ is going to be a staple in practically every deck, and I don't think that's a reach to say. Going first, it can search your deck for the classic Poison Tipped Arrow, which is widely regarded as the best going first rune, but if you lost the die roll and are on the draw, it can instead search for the new Poison Tipped Arrow Artemis's Arrow, a 1 lunar invoke rune that suppresses an Elestral and drops it by 2/2 for the turn, making your Cyanectar Champ effectively into a 6 attacker. More specifically for Dionysus though, it can search for the new Poison Nectar Dionysus' Chalice, which you can always do by dazing it with Dionysus, giving you an option to hand rip the opponent and burn them for 2, which you could actually do do twice on the first turn. All of this also enables Frostfall Cyanectar, who now can access Waspivy easier than ever, but can also now access Waspivy Champ, which would make it perma enraged and able to deal double damage on a whim. Lastly is Drataya Champ, who admittedly is the one cost that does the least on its own, dazing an Elestral on receive but having no way to trigger its own Ascension condition. However, if you can enrage it through any of the various methods Dionysus provides, you get Latagon Champ, who is one of the strongest aggressive Elestrals I've seen in a long time, able to pop a back row once per turn effectively, is immune to Tsunami and Alter as previously mentioned, and if the opponent does out it, can search Ambrosia to heal back the spirits you invested into it immediately. I see Latagon being the top performer out of these three directions, but more so expect these to see play in a splash of variety of decks without even using the 2-drops. Cyprong Champ on its own represents an Earthquake on legs for anything in its kill range, which covers a good majority of good cards. Cyanectar Champ is one of the strongest turn 1 plays we've seen since Astrap It, and Madness is an absolute staple that I expect will slot into many decks beyond just the Buzzed Boys. Keep an eye on them and don't let them get behind the wheel.
Aphrodite, Aphrodite, Aphrodite.
Aphrodite's base cost is 1 water and can go up to 4 on cast, with the ability to disenchant a water to search an Elestral with the same name as a water Elestral you already control. Dratagwa, Champion of Aphrodite, allows Aphrodite to find Lakagon in addition to Dratagwa, and you can Nexus a water to search an aquatic Elestral. Lakagon Champ can special cast a Lakagon from hand using only water if you haven't yet that turn, and heals 1 water when you cast Lakagon or Dratagwa. Foamy Champ searches Aphrodite on cast, and can be discarded with a water spirit to search for a 2-cost water Elestral. Caprigal Champ can't be destroyed in battle by 1 spirit Elestrals, and can expend a water or reveal a Caprigal in hand to pop a back row. Coastalith Champ can be normal cast for 2 water while you have an enchanted Aphrodite, and can discard a water card to draw a card, or 2 if you discarded a Coastalith. Aepharos Champ can be special cast with the water if you control Aepharos once per turn, and can make all Aepharos base 5 attack if you control 2 or more. Bubaloon Champ can be discarded with the water to enchant up to 2 water from Underworld or Spirit deck to a water card you control. Magneros Champ is considered Aepharos while enchanted, and searches Aepharos or Aphrodite soulmates when cast. Pelagarius Champ is considered a water Elestral while enchanted, and can Nexus a water to special ascend the receiver into a wind or water Elestral in hand. Necklace of Aphrodite is a 1 water artifact that gives Elestral +3 defense and the name of every water Elestral.
All of them?
And when its Elestral is destroyed by the opponent, heals 2 water. Aphrodite's Soulmate is a 1 water counter rune that can special cast a water Elestral from Underworld when it gets destroyed if you control another Elestral with the same name. Aphrodite on initial reveal back at the Cards HQ Open read as rather clunky all things considered, fetching duplicate waters in a meta where the only relevant water to do so with would be Galaxy. Now with the remainder of her archetype revealed, it's clear that this effect is an Aeolus or Hermes level enabler and combo potential with itself. Starting with Foamy Champ, you can cast and search Aphrodite, then immediately search another Foamy Champ to discard for a 2-drop, being a starter for literally every one of Aphrodite's lines. There's a couple directions you could take that, searching Caprigal Champ for the next turn setup as a 6/6 that pops a back row each turn, searching Coastalith Champ to turn your Aphrodite searches into raw draw power, even searching something like Draking and setting up an aggressive push outside of the normal Aphrodite routes, but my money is on you searching for Lakagon Champ. Lakagon Champ sticking, healing 1, then searching the original with Aphrodite will allow it to special cast the original from hand, which in turn triggers Champ's heal 1 effect, which in turn triggers the OG Lakagon's pop effect. From that line, you get a targeted pop and 2 2-spirit bodies to swing in with, and that alone is a massive advantage swing that would threaten any board. Add to that Aphrodite's soulmates to make them even harder to remove, and you've got a recipe for an avalanche of advantage, especially because triggering soulmates here would give you another pop on top of that. Even outside of the 2-drops, Aphrodite's toolkit is also looking really good generically, specifically in that Magneros Champ on its own represents 2 5s on the first turn thanks to Aepharos Champ special casting itself after searching it, with the same Aepharos then bumping them both up to 5s. Pelagarius Champ seems like a combo piece for a deck that we don't have yet, in that it can enable turn 1 access to a 3-drop wind water Elestral, but we'll have to see in the future if that pans out. Currently, it's still a Lakagon enabler with Aphrodite, so it'll see play in the meantime. Dratagwa Champ has added itself into the arsenal of Nexus searchers for subclasses alongside Exaltus and Comalis, though doesn't seem to be as abusable on first glance as some of the other targets are. Ivory Champ does look like a funny one though. We are definitely going to be seeing Champs of Aphrodite in this meta one way or another with this introduction, whether it be as 5s enablers or as its own strategy, and I'm next to positive that it'll include Aphrodite in tow somewhere, but only time will tell on that one. Anyways, Wayland's attack, flip Argo, empower your guy, mill every water Elestral in your deck?
But why?
Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Kione gets a support-focused reprint here, who, as a reminder, has a base cost of 1 Frost and can go up to 4 on cast, with the ability to disenchant 1 to recur a 1-cost Frost Celestial to hand. Ursical Champion of Kione searches Kione or Kione's Frostbite on cast. Abominursa Champ can Nexus a Frost from Kione to itself when it destroys an Elestral in battle, to special ascend into Glaciursa. Glaciursa Champ burns the opponent for the same number of spirits under Kione when it wins battle. Catarant Champ can foretell 4 and mill 1 of the foretold cards, ascending into an Iwooly in Underworld if you milled 1 this way. Iwooly Champ can mill 4 and special cast any 1-spirit Frost Elestrals milled that way once per turn. Morolith Champ can be normal cast with 2 Frost if you control an enchanted Kione, and dumps a 1-cost Frost from deck when you activate your Kione effect, meaning you can choose that new target as the Kione recur back. And Frostrix Champ can special cast any Elestral recurred with Kione's effect with Frost. Kione's Frostbite is a 1 Frost counter that, if you have an enchanted Kione or 1 in the Underworld, gives a Frost Celestial +2 attack and +1 more for every Frost rune in your Underworld until the end of the turn. Blizzard Whiteout is a 1 Frost counter that can negate an effect that targets a Frost Celestial that makes it unable to be attacked that turn. Swarm and Punch seems to be the name of the game with Frost this time around, and honestly some of these cards work extremely well together. Ursical is just good consistency, as you'd expect from the Bear Bomb Menace, and once it's resolved to get Kione and then died, you can always recur it back to get Frostbite after. Catarant and Iwooly easily make the cut for Blistrix now, as it takes your Swarm potential up to 11 if you can resolve the Iwooly effect. Morolith and Frostrix make an interesting symbiotic relationship with one another, effectively turning Kione into a special cast out of deck for any Frost 1-drop. Abominursa and Glaciursa are definitely threatening, but also require a specific board state to go off to their full potential, and that board state will next to never have no back row, though now thanks to Whiteout you can punch through a Gorgons at least. Frostbite and Whiteout are definitely the standouts here, with Frostbite effectively being don't poke for Kione decks, but whether Kione's support is good enough to justify the power rune is up for debate. Whiteout on the other hand is just insanely versatile. It's much less about the stopping combat portion and more about the ability to guarantee your Frost effects resolve through Gorgon's Gaze, which does bode well for combo and Swarm Frost variants. Even if the champions of Kione don't see play, I do expect that Whiteout's going to see play, especially because it's searchable with Brummelink's champ. Don't sleep on this one.
You see, at the end of this wormhole lies a room with a moose! Nah, wait a minute.
Artemis is the last divine getting the dedicated support block with a reprint, who has a base cost of 1 lunar and can go up to 4 on cast, with the ability to disenchant 1 to suppress a card the opponent controls until the end of their next turn. Fawnlet Champion of Artemis can enchant a lunar from Underworld to itself if the opponent has a suppressed card, and can't be destroyed by battle while the opponent controls a suppressed Elestral. Theraheart Champ can search a lunar counter rune once per turn. Posthumous Champ suppresses all opponents' Elestrals while Artemis is enchanted, and when a suppressed Elestral is destroyed, you heal 3 lunar. Bandaloon Champ can expend a lunar to steal a suppressed 1-spirit Elestral for the turn once per turn. Fungide Champ searches a Fungide or follow the Wisps every time you suppress 1 or more cards. Brontowish Champ can Nexus a Fire or Lunar to make all of your other Elestrals unattackable until your next turn, as long as it remains enchanted. Lunar Phase Lunar Eclipse is a 2 lunar invoke that targeted pops back row up to the number of lunar Elestrals you control, and is considered full moon while on the chain. Poison Tipped Arrow, Artemis's Arrow, is a 1 lunar invoke that, wait, didn't we talk about this already? Well, played with Artemis, it also re-enchants a lunar to Artemis, so basically it refunds itself. Artemis's Deadshot is a 1 lunar counter that pops an Elestral when it's played by disenchanting lunar from Artemis equal to its enchantment cost. Basically an instant PTA that's exclusive to Artemis. Dense Fog Achilles Miss removes all stat changes from the field for the turn, and if discarded by either your lunar Elestral or your opponent's effect, lets you draw 2 cards. Rise from the Shadows lets you recast any Elestral that's destroyed by the opponent using only lunar from your Underworld. Artemis's toolset seems extremely powerful, though notably is very much locked to being used with Artemis exclusively, but this time around I think it's fair. Theraheart Champ being able to grab Deadshot, Mist, or Rise every turn seems extremely powerful, and worth putting in the investment for, especially since it's searchable with the original Fawnlet. Posthumous Champ turning Artemis into a blanket suppression is unbelievably powerful, and constantly reloading her spirits makes Deadshot a much easier sell long term. Deadshot being effectively an instantaneous PTA is incredible, though with such a heavy investment cost ensures it's never going to get played outside of an Artemis dedicated deck. Rise is probably the most generically splashable of the new runes, thanks to not being locked to any of the lunar specifics, only requiring that you play enough lunar to have them in the discard to lock and load its revival attempt. Miss seems to be the exact kind of card that Toxiri and Night Venom needed to be relevant, as now you have another 3 Dense Fogs in your lineup for Night Venom to get that Invoke Rune immunity, as well as one that works perfectly with its discard to pop effect, which leaves us with Lunar Eclipse. Moonrise Werepup can now search this, which in turn can remove at least 1 potential back row from the opponent before ascending up into Like a Void, which can then punch that turn with its immunity, no more needing to wait and see. be. However, we do have another option now in Lycovoid Champion of Artemis Escape from Tartarus, which is the proposed eroded version of Lycovoid Champ, just now on a dual titled Elestral instead. The effect here in any other deck would not be good enough to run over the Moonrise Lycovoid, but specifically for Artemis, who is already going to be suppressing things left and right, this fits in nicely. Definitely a contender for this upcoming metagame, but you guys aren't ready for the actual suppression deck of the format. Cyanectar's gonna be everywhere, and now there's an easy way to suppress. It's time.
Every day when you're walking down the street, everybody that you meet.
Giraflora Champion of Demeter can recur a Demeter or Champ of Demeter if it's the highest defense Celestial on the field once per turn. Gigaflora Champ can be discarded with an Earth Spirit to search for a Champion of Demeter and can special cast a Champion of Demeter from Underworld and give it +3 attack once per turn. While Station Champ enchants an Earth from Underworld to itself when it attacks, then does it again and gives itself piercing damage if it has the highest attack on the field. A pivot from the initial wave we saw in Firestorm, Demeter's champions now are focused on having the highest stat on the board, which is fitting for the 3/3 buff Divine. Giraflora having a base 5 defense means you should regularly be able to trigger its effect and set up the Gigaflora you no doubt pitched to search it, meaning you can then search another champion, or just hold it to set up the Gigaflora for next turn. While Station should regularly be able to punch for a bunch of damage, but is much more dependent on having Demeter than Giraflora is. Look, after Verdolith Champ, the series could only go up. Even that has some band-aiding on it between the giraffes enabling it more, but even still seems at odds with the strat as its 6 defense stat would also turn off Giraflora. These tools are taking Demeter in an interesting direction in line with her identity as a divine, though I still doubt that they're enough to see play in a dedicated strategy until we get one more wave. Don't forget about Pandison Champ. Card is still a once per turn heal. Ursier Champion of Hestia burns the opponent for 1 every time an Ursa is cast. Kinleo Champ heals 3 fire or searches Leonite on special cast. Leonite Champ buffs all fire enchanted Elestrals by 3/3 on receiving fire until the next turn, and as long as it has 9 or more attack, can't be destroyed by rune effects or have its position changed. Definitely an interesting direction to take Hestia after her debut in Firestorm, but once again feels disjointed. Ursier's burn being tied to Ursa's rather than Champions of Hestia once again reopens the wound that Hestia feels like she's 3 different decks masquerading as one unfocused strategy, though does seem like it may be an interesting fit in a dedicated Ursa strategy. Leonite Champ's immunity sounds good on paper until you realize that the turn it's cast, the immunity is only applicable to PTA and Tsunami, with Shield being able to answer it effectively, and triggering its immunity on the opponent's turn is going to require either Forge to be up or flipping a Hestia's Hearth, which is just giving me Warmite vibes all over again. Only I lied, it's not actually immunity to PTA, as PTA will drop its attack back down to 8, even through its buff, meaning that PTA can still answer it. It's no secret at this stage that Hestia's niche is enabling jank combo strategies like the Waspire and Blazerous OTKs, so at the very least, Kinleo does give you a way to replenish your resources that you put into it before ascending over it, but considering how chock full those decks already are with its combo pieces, it's going to be very difficult to find space for a healer.
Trust is not given its portion.
Smoltuga Champion of Hephaestus lets your Hephaestus search fire and invoke runes, and can reveal an artifact in hand to special ascend into Krakatuga from hand or deck. Krakatuga Champ's attack and defense are swapped while empowered, and prevents artifacts and empowered Elestrals from being destroyed or bounced on your turn. Krakatuga reads as the king beater of fire artifact decks, being an 8/4 base and immune to every staple back row except Gorgons, and that cannot be understated. What's going to be hard to manage though is that with the stat swapping happening while it's empowered, it means that unlike every other fire artifact Elestral, it wants defense more than attack, which may be a point against it overall. Smoltuga though has a whole litany of potential, namely in that it allows for Hephaestus to now search Stoke the Forge, or, much more importantly for this section, Eruption. Searching Eruption, then revealing an artifact to ascend into the old Krakatuga is an extremely threatening line, as that threatens a pop on top of 6 sudden burn damage, a massive threat to follow up your Volcari's Champ turn 1 with. While I'm not sold on Krakatuga Champ, Smoltuga Champ is absolutely a staple of a new direction for fire artifact that I think needs to see some form of experimentation.
And the Sand Guardian, Guardian of the Sand. Poseidon quivers before him!
Typhlant Champion of Poseidon can enchant itself with the water from Underworld once per turn, and can special ascend into Ivory from hand or deck when it receives a water in a Nexus, and you haven't already special cast an Ivory that turn. Ivory Champ foretells 1 for every water on all Ivories when it receives water, and can add all cards that mention Poseidon in its effect or title foretold that way to hand. Kraken Champ on cast and on receiving water from Poseidon's effect blocks an unoccupied opponent's Elestral slot as long as it's enchanted. Kraken Champ can special cast with 2 water if you've blocked 2 or more Elestral slots and you haven't special cast Cracking that turn, and can expend a water to recur a water card once per turn. Foamy Champion of Poseidon, because apparently I have to specify that now, searches a 1-spirit Oceanic on receiving water. Caprigal Champ of Poseidon searches Trident of Poseidon on cast and pops a card when it receives water in a Nexus from Poseidon. Poseidon's crew seems to still be a little bit disjointed as a whole, with none of them particularly supporting each other outside of Ivory Champ's Foretell. They each still contain a way to benefit from Poseidon's Nexus effect, but at this stage there's still no way to search Poseidon in water, meaning that most of the strategy is going to land with a thud. Foamy Champion of Poseidon holds a particular usefulness though thanks to its kin Foamy Champion of Aphrodite, able to access it quickly then search out tools like Eddy, Galaxy, or even Narpoon to access Frost Elestrals, but all of these are already accessible with Pelicarius. These are probably fine to pass on for now, but keep an eye open in case we get a Poseidon searcher. No, Ivory Champ doesn't count. You bunch of them actuallys. Amp Up Champion of Zeus can expend a Thunder and pitch an Amp Up to special ascend into Lycavolt. Lycavolt Champ can drop an Elestral by 2 attack once per turn, popping it when it hits 0, and if Zeus is enchanted, has targeting immunity from divine effects. Spark It Champ searches either Zeus or Zeus's Call on cast, and Godabolt Champ special casts a 1-cost Thunder from hand anytime you cast Zeus or a Thunder Invoke, and is immune to invokes while you control 5 or more enchanting Thunder Spirits. Out of the 4 divines that we're focused on in Firestorm, Zeus absolutely got the best deal, getting not 1 but 2 new fantastic 1-drops that solve legitimate issues with the strategy. Spark It Champ fills the void of Zeus Searcher that the strategy has desperately needed since the banning of Velichek, but on top of that has the option to search Zeus's Call, which in turn means that you can either search Zeus or any champion of Zeus if you already have Zeus established. This means that Spark It Champ is either a 5 after the Zeus drop that can threaten a potential Volt Tempest champ drop out of hand, or is a Grypheus champ, which is honestly just as, if not more, threatening. Amp Up Champ on the other hand makes the original Amp Up an insane deck thinner while also being a threat in any deck that runs enough Thunder. Starting with an original Amp Up, you have the ability to thin your deck by up to 5, then use those to establish either a Lycavolt or a Lycavolt Champ depending on your deck. In testing, this package is unquestionably my favorite package in Lifestream, as you can either play a 3-2 split of original and Champ Pup with 1 Lycavolt target, or you can run a full 3-3 with both Lycavolts, as it makes it to where if you open 2 Amp Ups, you can do Lycavolt plays 2 turns in a row. Champions of Zeus may actually be a strategy now, and Amp Up is a real threat that should not be slept on. Thunder on top, baby! Piga's Champion of Aeolus can special ascend to Falocane if you cast Tornado or Hurricane. Falocane Champ can Nexus up to 3 wind from Aeolus to itself to bounce that many cards on the field. Finda's Champ makes all wind spirits you use Earth as well, and when it receives 2 or more Earth at once, special casts Habufin from hand or deck. Habufin Champ lets your Aeolus search Earth Invoke, and either heals or re-enchants 3 to an Aeolus from Underworld when you cast an Earth rune twice per turn. Pigas and Falocane represent a more sudden burst game plan, requiring Tornado to be worthwhile, but also the card's been picking up play since Julian's Illusion of Choice top, so this may not be as big of an ask as you'd expect, especially since this line is probably just a 1-1 line played with Aeolus. Findas and Habufin Champ on the other hand represent an extremely interesting game plan, as by ascending Findas Champ over any wind, it's enough to trigger its +2 Earth Receive effect, which special casts Habufin immediately. This enables OG Habufin, who can threaten a wave of suppression and defense swapping, or can enable Habufin Champ, who turns Aeolus into an Earthquake Searcher. While there are funny applications you can do with Habufin Champ, like Ambrosia Cornucopia becoming a Super Ambrosia, or Mudslide being a Divine Killer, these applications are a touch too niche for my taste to think that they will see consistent play. Still funny though. Aviolith Champion of Hermes can be normal cast with 2 wind if you control an enchanted Hermes, and either heals or re-enchants 4 wind to Hermes from Underworld when sent from field to Underworld, or when pitched with Hermes effect. While it seems situational, if Kothmel has taught me anything, it's not to discount Ascent to Underworld heal. Aviolith adds additional utility to your Hermes by letting it be Ambrosia if you want, or can be a supersized Kathmel. Honestly, I'd be far more into it if there was a good 3-drop wind this could enable, but for now I'd still probably play a copy in my Hermes decks to at least be a potential Ambrosia.
Although I'm a fan of catchy songs.
Glimbat Champion of Apollo can discard itself with a Solar to search for Temple of the Sun. Novacore Champ can be normal cast with 2 Solar if Temple of the Sun's enchanted, and pops an Elestral on cast. Corvishine Champ bumps all of your Foretell effects up by 3 cards, and can shuffle the deck to re-enchant a Solar to Apollo from Underworld once per turn. Humbus Champion is considered a Solar Elestral when foretold, and mills the opponent for any amount you foretell +1 while on field. Humburst Champ can ascend over Humbus when you foretell it, and can mill the opponent for 4 once per turn if you control an enchanted Apollo. Royal Laudel can foretell 3 to an opponent's attack declaration, negate it if you foretold the Solar Elestral, and add the Solar Elestral you foretold that way to hand. Solar Burst foretells 4 and pitches a Solar Elestral found this way to pop an opponent's Elestral with equal or lower enchantment cost. Ooh boy, these are weird. As I've previously mentioned on this channel, Humbus Champ plus Corvishine Champ does make 5 foretells into a mill out, as most foretells are a base of 3 cards, so with Corvishine they're 6, meaning a mill 7 from Humbust. We've already cracked that with these pieces there is an 8 card mill FTK combo, but that is going to require a very specific deck that can go off the rails extremely easily to pull off. While I do think that there is a deck to do it, that still sounds like a very jank scenario to engineer, but I'll suppose we'll have to wait and see if it can put up results. On a much more notable point, Glimbat and Novacore Champ are just insane. Lavalith was played in everything just because it was a big guy that could pop a card on cast, and Novacore does it with more agency on your end as the trigger is a stadium you'll set up. I don't think these solve the main issue with the current Champs of Apollo deck, being the need for a good attack stat on a 1-drop to get the bonus from Liar without it needing to be on the Elestral, but an Elestral popping Lavalith is nothing to scoff at. On top of that, Corvishine does make it to where you can just turbo through your deck with Apollo and make it repeatable, so we may be looking at a much more powerful version of the old Solar decks from Daybreak. Josh, what do you mean that Celestleo is good now?
Let's do some business. Free agency begins in 3, 2, 1.
Barabib can Nexus Earth or Water and special ascends to Barabog when it receives water. Barabog can expend an Earth and Water to daze an Elestral until your next turn, and can special ascend to Baraboss if dazed. Baraboss on receiving Earth or Water can make itself into a stadium or revert itself back to an Elestral, with its stadium effect permadazing anything that isn't Water or Earth enchanted, in addition to dropping their attack and defense by 3, and blocking the opponent from playing a stadium. Yeah Alex, I'll take reasons to play Tornado for 500. So Baraboss is a powerful floodgate for certain, but also serves as a canary in a coal mine to say the least. If this effect ever became decent, the amount of Tornado and Thunderstorm we'd see in the meta would skyrocket, and Thunderstorm already has a reason to be played this set. A bit too expensive to be answered so trivially for my taste, but consider it for your local meta depending on your local scene. Hopperoo can attack directly if it has exactly 1 spirit on it, and when it deals damage can foretell 3 and add an Earth card foretold that way to hand. Rumantis can attack directly, and when it deals damage you can bounce it back to hand, recasting it using Earth from Underworld in your next draw phase. Close enough. Welcome back, Drill Warrior. Direct attacking has been a concept for a bit with Zephyrog, but Zephyrog never had a way to protect itself. Rumantis as a concept is fascinating, and once it's landed is self-sufficient for the remainder of its time in play, being a 2 damage ping every turn while you continue on with your other game plan. Hopperoo and a dedicated Earth deck also just seems really good, as you'll always be able to grab something if you're a Dionysus deck, and since it's a foretell, you can always stack something that wasn't addable on top for the next turn, which is the soonest you'd be able to use it anyways.
Hippity hoppity, get off my property.
Hellmelt can be special cast from the Underworld with fire from either Spirit deck or Underworld when discarded. Smell Tongue can Nexus up to 2 fire to discard your hand and draw that many, and when sent from hand to the Underworld as a discard, can re-enchant up to 2 fire from Underworld to field. Up in Flames is a 2 fire invoke that can discard a fire Elestral to pop an Elestral with a lower enchantment cost than it. Magma Enjoyers rejoice, you now have a game plan for your discards. So clearly we're back on the concept of making Deep Draw combo into a fire playstyle, and these honestly should have been mentioned back up with Hestia, but I'm so far down in the script now that I really don't feel like moving it. Honestly speaking, this seems like it could really do a number specifically for the various Hestia OTK decks thanks to the insane amount of deep draw you'd have access to. So don't discount it just because it's only a little support. Funglow Charge can be special cast if you casted a Thunderstorm that turn or control a Thunderstorm Supercell. Brontiglow Supercharged burns the opponent for 1 for every Funglow you control once per turn and gives all Funglow and Brontiglow +2 attack while you have Supercell enchanted. Thunderstorm Supercell is a 1 Thunder stadium that heals 1 Thunder every time you cast a Thunderstorm or Elestral that mentions Thunderstorm, and yes, that does include itself. Effectively turning Thunderstorm into a 1 cost already is enough for the strategy to see some kind of play, but add to that the fact that Frostfall Funglow now has the boss worth casting leaves you with potentially one of the strongest swarm strategies we've seen in a while. Frostfall Funglow with any Thunderstorm means access to Brontiglow Supercharged, which in turn means that you have a 4 and 9 attacker out on top of a once per turn burn and any other little guys you can swarm with in the meantime. Titanostrike and Champ Strike both become far more threatening too, as with access to more Thunderstorms, the original's pop effect is a far simpler trigger. Speaking of access, you effectively have access to Thunderstorm off of 12 different cards in your deck now. 3 copies of the OG Thunderstorm, 3 copies of Supercell, 3 copies of Titanostrike Champ, and 3 copies of Jolton, who's even in element for this. This reads to me as Thunder's next big venture into the meta, especially with Divine Runes becoming so critical for certain strategies. Get your full art Thunderstorms now.
It's gonna be big.
Nemisail heals a wind anytime you cast a rune with wind, and can disenchant a water from itself to special ascend into Terrasail. Terrasail buffs all wind and water enchanted Elestrals by +3 attack, makes them untargetable by an opponent's divine runes, and makes them unbounceable. Not every card in a set can be a winner, but I do think that Terrasail here has a place in a deck like Pig Terror, being a mass board buff that also gives your Elestrals immunity to Shield of Achilles. It also pairs extremely well with Monsoon of Iruis, as you can apply that buff and chain to something like a shield to a naturally not water or wind Elestral, which does bode well for it. Nemisail here also can access Frostfall Terrasail, which in turn can enable a significant amount of swarming, though that may require some nimble maneuvering to pull off. Morfrost Chimera form can discard a Morfrost to draw a card. A base 5 attack Frost is rather massive for the element, and being on a Morfrost makes it even more threatening, as now you can Lycan form to search Chimera and Bat, cast the Chimera discarding Bat to draw a card, and revive the Lycan you started with. This allows Morfrost packages to now operate on turn 1 for a 2 Elestral swarm, as previously Scorpio needed to target an opponent's Elestral to even trigger, and as such, a larger Morfrost package is going to be easier to justify. In the later game, the Bat Revive can even be used to cast back out a spent Chimera, and that alone sounds terrifying to play into. Sundial skips an opponent's next draw phase after destroying an Elestral in battle. Nomadial can discard a solar card to skip an opponent's next battle phase. Chronodial can expend 2 solar to skip an opponent's next draw phase and draws a card when the opponent's turn starts. Honestly speaking, these are just not great. Chronodial effectively turns your opponent's draw into a burn you for 2 for free, and while its draw effect would be kind of nuts for a commander style Elestrals, that's not something we currently can do officially. If you do want to play Croc, stick with Daybreak Chronodial. I mean, it just won a premiere, it can't be that bad. Gambit can target an Elestral and flip a coin, destroying it on heads and healing its controller by its enchantment cost if tails.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Dan's gone on the record saying that this is one of his favorite cards from the set, and I gotta say, I don't see it. Putting the effect to destroy on a coin flip doesn't make the card balance, it just makes it inconsistent and infuriating to play, especially with such a heavy drawback if you miss. I see many players likening it to Snipe Hunter from Yu-Gi-Oh!, who could discard a card to roll the dice for a 2/3 chance to pop, which I don't think is an apt comparison. Gambit is once per turn by nature, so if you miss, you don't have an opportunity to fire it again, and it has a slight to massive drawback in healing the opponent if it misses, unlike Snipe. And sadly, it doesn't fill a niche either because Boom Bat exists. It's a funny card, but sadly not one I'd play in any of my decks. If I lose to it though, I am going to tilt. Sisyphus's Boulder is a 1 Earth Invoke that returns 5 Elestrals or runes from Underworld to deck, shuffles the deck, then mills 5. I didn't have additional Ballistric support on my checklist, especially not coming from Earth of all places, but I do love this card. It gives you the option to either load back in your mill targets for a super mill shot, or effectively lets you re-roll a bad mill where you hit all of your staple runes and try it again. I don't see a world where this doesn't end up in Ballistrix, so definitely keep an eye out for it. Ice Age is a 3 Frost Invoke that disenchants 2 Frost from the field to nuke all non-Frost enchanted Elestrals. A 5-cost conditional Dark Hole, and sadly, the deck that's poised to be the best swarm deck in the game is Frost, which this does nothing to.
Why?
Anyway, moving on. Guardian of Light is a 1 solar counter rune that negates an opponent's attack and heals up to 2 solar. This would be my secondary pick for back row of the set, with Madness being my number 1, because the fact that Guardian not only stops the attack but also heals back what you put into it is fantastic, as it lets you run a spirit line of 2 solar in anything to justify 3 copies. You can always expend the first solar early on, and then from then on you're looping the 2 to fuel it until the end of time. This is also insanely great in any solar deck, as you'll get the full benefit of the heal. This is a card you should honestly be considering at 3 for all of your decks. Asterius Starfall nexuses 1 to swap any spirit on field for a different spirit from the spirit deck. The amount of on-receive effects this can trigger is nuts, and the amount of random niche interaction play this can make are too numerous to name. But here's a couple of mine. You attack with an on-receiver, your opponent flips Tsunami. You can nexus the receive triggered spirit to it, then tag that spirit into a water from spirit deck. You are no longer swapping to defense, and your on-receive still triggers since it connected. What if you don't have that Elestral's on-receive element out? No problem. Nexus any spirit you want to it, then swap that spirit for the on-receive spirit. You'll still get the trigger. There's a ton of random niche applications this card has, and while this will not be meta-breaking in the slightest, it does hold a ton of random potential. So much so that I'd put it up with Alter as some of the most interestingly designed cards in the game. Galaxy Champ and Astrabbit have a new best friend. Lifestream's got me theory crafting more than any other set in the past off of this, and honestly, this looks to be the move we all needed to finally leave general good stuff piles behind, and start looking at proper game plan decks. Anyway, see you all in a month when every card I said wasn't great turned out to be the secret meta-breaking tech. I need a shower. Jaxel, please don't sue me.